Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, quite the crowd.
Welcome.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone.
We'll wait a few more minutes to give everybody the chance to join. I think we're going to start in 2 or 3 minutes.
Sounds good to me.
Welcome, everybody. There is a chat function. So if you want to chat something, if you want to compliment Clark on his hair or on his mustache, you can do so in the chat.
Please feel free.
Also, if you have any questions right now or during the webinar, feel free to use the chat function from that, and then we'll address them during the webinar. Cool.
Well, Rainier, while we wait, I know that today's webinar topic hinted a little bit at the metaphor we'll be discussing today, the difference between the steering wheel and the rearview mirror. So I thought I would try out a few car-related puns on you, test out my dad joke skills. So what kinds of cars do cooks drive? Chevrolets.
Oh, wow. Oh, Clark.
I know. Second career in comedy. And oh, I like this one. Who can drive all their customers away and still make money? Taxi drivers.
True.
Makes you think. Makes you think.
That's a smart one. Okay. Yeah. Recovered there.
Recovered there. Oh, this one's very bad. What snakes are found on cars? Windshield vipers.
Wow. Okay.
It's a new low. I feel like we got up there and then
yeah. I see people dropping out already, Clark.
Yeah. I've got to be careful.
Now, everybody, we're going to start in a minute. We see still people are joining, so we'll give them a few more minutes. Great to see everybody in there. Cool. Hi, Katie. Hello, Ricardo. See Sadaf. Very nice. Spiros, our man in Bangkok. Amazing. Cool. Nice to see you all. And as said before, please feel free to use the chat if you want to ask a question or if you want to say anything. We're constantly monitoring it. I think it's 3 past. Let's wait a few more seconds, but also let's get started. Also, out of respect for the people that did make it on time, I think it's good to not wait too long. So let's get going. So welcome everybody to our webinar, a Launch and Learn, and it is about innovation tracking. We think it's a hot topic. What we want to discuss today, we thought of something, how we are approaching it in a slightly different way, and we want to share that with you. So we are going to present to you. I'm Rainier. I'm the co-founder of Veylinx, within the company responsible for everything that has to do with our clients, but also with our methods and approaches and everything new there. And with me is Clark. And Clark, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, so Clark, originally from Australia, hence the funny accent, but one of the senior insights consultants here at Veylinx, and really excited to be here with Rainier to talk about a very hot topic, and that is innovation tracking.
Excited. Cool. Well, let's get going then. And before we get started, so what's on the agenda? So we have the metaphor from rear view mirror to steering wheel. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And also we did a little bit of polling that we're also going to do in this webinar to understand, well, what do people think right now about innovation tracking? And after that, we're going to talk about, well, what is being done today, setting the scene on what works and what doesn't work. And then we're going to introduce our new idea, which is introducing value as a key metric for innovation tracking. But first, we have a question. Are you currently doing innovation tracking in any form? And how satisfied are you with that currently? And I think a poll should pop up on your screen, and we're very interested if you can select your choice. And it will be interesting to see what comes out of it. think a few more seconds you have available to vote. And then hopefully, Karina, you will be able to make this lovely poll disappear and maybe share something about the outcome, or that will come after. Great. I will be patient. Not my strongest suit.
I mean, we're all very curious to hear the outcome of the poll, so I'm with you, Rainier.
Ooh, I think there are some outcomes. They are being typed right now. Ooh, that's interesting. So 5% is satisfied. 37% is neutral. Cliffhanger. Do we also know 21% is somewhat dissatisfied? And then the final, can also do a quick calculation. So then I think 32% indeed is somewhat dissatisfied as well. Yeah. So it is indeed, and 5% is very dissatisfied. So it's quite equally distributed. I mean, it's not terrible, but absolutely there are opportunities to increase the post-launch tracking, where most people believe either it's indifferent or it can be done better. We did a small polling beforehand. And what we saw there indeed was where we asked, well, how much value does innovation tracking deliver to your organization? And we saw that companies that are using it think it's quite important. It's an important element in your toolbox to make sure that the products that you're launching become a success. It's important, and indeed also the value that it delivers is quite a lot, or is quite important. Some verbatims that we had on it. Some people say, well, some challenges that we have, it's clear what's happened, but not always clear why. And of course, the why question is crucial if you want to improve something. We don't always understand the reasons behind our failures. Well, that's of course quite explicit, because sometimes there's success as well, but it's also important to understand what is driving your success. And some missing elements that we asked about, well, actual consumer usage versus shopper, they're not always the same person. So who is the actual user, and is this providing value to the user or only to the shopper? And also better understanding of the right indicators to use for tracking post-launch. And I think that is something where we can build a bit further up on in this presentation. So the metaphor that we wanted to use is mirror or steering wheel. So in your car, of course, you have your rear view mirror, which is great for looking back. And often what we see also with post-launch trackers, they are great for looking back. You can see, how did we launch the product? How did it perform during launch? How well are we at converting people to become aware, to try our product, to repeat buy our product? It's great to evaluate how your launch went. It's a lot more difficult or challenging to actually use it as a steering wheel. And as a steering wheel, you are in the driver's seat, and you are able to actually make changes to your launch based on the insights that you are getting from your innovation tracking capabilities, while you are still doing the initiatives in your launch. And that is, of course, the dream. But at the moment, it is quite challenging to be there. Maybe a little bit to set the scene, what is an innovation? Because we're talking about innovation tracking. And the thing that most obviously comes to mind is, of course, a new product launch. If you launch a new product, very clearly an innovation launch. But for us, an innovation can also be a repositioning of something that is also already existing, or it can be the launch of a new brand. At least anything that you're changing and launching, ideally having a campaign around, and that you want to see build up awareness in your market. And I want to make explicit that the launch is not the end of a process, but the launch is pretty much a start of a journey towards long-term success. And very often we are working very hard to get everything ready to the launch. So there is, of course, the ID screening, the concept testing, pricing, market readiness, home usage test, everything to get the product to a great state that it will become a success, but yet still sometimes our products fail. And that also has to do with how we are doing the launch. So the launch is not the end, but the launch should be the start of a journey towards long-term success. And that is where I think the tracking capabilities are paramount. And currently what we see a lot with innovation tracking, there are some KPIs being managed, but one of the most important KPIs that people are looking at is sales data. How much are we selling in the first months? And is that number increasing enough? Then we'll probably do okay, even though we don't really understand why. And that is a challenge because sales is the result of all your efforts, your distribution buildup, your awareness buildup, your marketing activities, your campaigns, your promotions, everything adds up to a transaction. So a transaction or sales happen all the way in the end, and therefore are quite difficult to use as an early indication of success. If you want to use a KPI that you can use to actually course correct while doing your campaigns, while being in the first months of your launch, sales is quite difficult for that because it is the result of everything. And the other thing is sales are happening because of various factors. A lot of things need to go well, but you cannot really read back, well, are my sales the way they are because of the awareness, because of the effectiveness of my campaign, because of the effectiveness of my promotions? It's very difficult to dilute back to what was the success or the failure fundamentally behind the results of your sales. So it's an important KPI, but in order to use innovation tracking as a steering wheel, it is a difficult KPI to use. Now, I want to introduce a new theory, and this is indeed what we want to introduce, and that is value as a KPI. And the concept of value is, of course, I think we all know it, but the way how we are looking at it is quite economically. And value is the value that people see in a good or a product. And very theoretically, a transaction will happen if a consumer sees more value in a good or a product than the money, the monetary value that they need to give up to obtain it. So if you would prefer to have the product over the money that you need to spend for it, you will buy something. Very logical, very simple. When you launch something in the market, you start at zero. There is zero distribution, there is zero awareness, and there is not yet any perceived value that people see in your product. And then all the activities that you are doing with the launch, getting your products listed, making sure they're on shelves, having a campaign, having promotions, everything that you do helps to build three things: your distribution, your awareness, but also the value that people see in your product. And this value is very interesting because, well, it starts low, but if people see your TV copy, if people see it on shelf, if people hear about it, if people talk about it, the value that they see in your product increases up to a point where the perceived value is higher than the money they need to give up for it. And that's when a transaction will happen. So this is something that we are introducing to start tracking within your innovation tracking capabilities. Another one where we can tie this to pretty nicely is the Byron Sharp principles. I'm sure people are aware of this. Byron Sharp pretty much says, well, it's important to be physically available and mentally available. Once these conditions ring true, transactions will happen. So it's crucial to be available in the stores, online or physically near where consumers shop, but also to be mentally available. So when people are thinking about purchasing something in the category, that you pop up and that you're an attractive offer there. And we feel we can split this out a bit further with the value development. Because of course, value development within Byron Sharp model is sort of more or less considered within the mental availability, but we believe awareness can be measured in a different way than perceived value. So we would split this up, and this is pretty much the triangle for our framework of innovation tracking. How available are you physically? How available are you mentally? With that, we mean awareness. And how is the perceived value of your product? Are you in line with what people are willing to spend for it? And ideally, are you more valuable than the product that is costing for at the market? From here, I'm going to hand it over to Clark, who will talk you through some more details. Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Rainier. So it's a pretty tricky problem. how do we get closer to understanding true consumer value as it relates to innovation? So here at Veylinx, like Rainier said, we believe value is the best way to understand and inform our strategy throughout the life cycle of an innovation. Value as a metric isn't intended to replace sales as the primary measure of success, but rather we can deploy it in research to explain the why behind our sales results right throughout that lifestyle. So value can be a helpful guide to allow us to understand the impact of our launch plans, where we can study different activities to understand the extent to which they're driving incremental value from consumers. So do we see certain channels delivering more impact than others? Do we see higher value among certain demographic groups? Are value perceptions higher or lower in certain cities or regions as a result of local marketing activations or events? And by learning, we can also pivot our launch strategy in real time or help inform future strategies too. Similarly, we can also understand the factors that impact purchase and repurchase, trial and repurchase. For example, we might see that awareness is our biggest blocker to success. And actually, when we expose consumers to this nascent product, they do really see the value in it. They're willing to pay for that product. Conversely, we might see that repurchase is our biggest issue. We need to really relook at the product proposition or perhaps even radically rethink the project entirely. And of course, the ability to track value over time offers immense advantages too. It allows us to study inflection points that drive meaningful changes in value. So really a very hardy metric indeed. And I'm sure that most of you are aware, at Veylinx, we like to do things a little differently. And the reason we came into space is to tackle the very thorny issue of overclaim. Now, when we ask consumers whether they'd like to purchase a product at its retail price, so let's say a can of soda for $2, we might see almost unanimously that consumers claim to have interest in doing so, in purchasing that product. But when push comes to shove and consumers have to part ways with their own money, we see pretty radically different results. And that's because there's a pretty big gap between what people say they want and what they'll actually do. And so leveraging consumer behavior unpacks this effect and helps us gather far more realistic and nuanced understanding of value right throughout the life cycle of an innovation. So how does it work at Veylinx? First, we explain to consumers that they're about to participate in a real auction. This isn't your traditional research setting. And in our auctions, they can place a single sealed bid that reflects the maximum that they would be willing to pay for a product or how much they value it. And a product could be a single SKU, like we see here, a can of soda. It could be a range of different products. It could be a portfolio. And if the product is available, then winners will have the opportunity to purchase the product for real. And we look after all of those finer details, such as facilitating the transaction, the shipping, etc. If the product's not available, the deal is off and no transactions take place. But very importantly, consumers don't know whether the product is in fact available. So they're exposed to the same risk of purchase regardless, which means the stakes for consumers to be honest with us are much more elevated than traditional or old-fashioned research. And by looking at consumers' maximum willingness to pay for a product, we can get a quantified expression of how they value it in dollars and cents or pounds and pence. And what could be a better reflection of value than that? And I won't go too much into the detail and the theoretical underpinnings of our methodology, but it is based on a Nobel Prize winning economic theory called the Vickrey auction, which some of you may have heard me ad lib on at length. But essentially, it's a economic theory designed to allocate resources in a scarce environment. And you might wonder as well, it's all well and good, sell that can of soda for $2, but how do we as Veylinx manage to track innovation when our innovation isn't just a single product or a range? How do we measure value across an entire brand, for instance? Because as we know, sometimes innovations can comprise an entirely new offering. And one of the ways that we've helped clients understand their brand value is to actually sell the brand directly to consumers. Our brand value tracking offers consumers the opportunity to buy a gift card, which they can then redeem to purchase the branded products of their choice. We have an example up on screen now where we've offered consumers the opportunity to buy a $100 gift card for Walmart or Kroger and so on. And it's really the discount that consumers apply to that brand that helps inform just how valuable it is in the minds of consumers. So if you're willing to pay $99 for a $100 gift card, then that's a pretty valuable brand. But $5 for a $100 gift card, then our innovation might need a good rethink. So ultimately, for any successful innovation, each touch point should add to consumers' value perceptions. And whether that's a single product or a range or a brand, regardless, each touch point should add to consumers' value perceptions. In traditional purchase funnel modeling, we unfortunately ignore the value that each touch point brings, but simply report back on claimed metrics such as likability, for instance. Our value tracker, our innovation tracker, measures the development of value as consumers move through the purchase funnel, giving us plenty of actionable insights. And we can look at each individual's position in the funnel to uncover their value perceptions. As we know, and as Rainier recapped earlier, brands need to be mentally and physically available to consumers so that consumers can easily choose them when making their purchasing decisions. But availability alone isn't enough to drive growth. For that, the products have to be sufficiently valuable for consumers to purchase. So our third metric works, as Rainier recapped earlier, as a complement to these two dimensions. The three have to work in harmony, both mental and physical availability, as well as value for consumers. Now, the shape of our purchase funnel and the stages within it will naturally vary depending on the category, whether it's a low involvement, high involvement category. You might see some different steps, but you'll find an example on screen for us to talk through. And I should say before we get into the actionability piece that we like to sit down and understand the ways we can influence innovation before we get started with innovation tracking. So we really want to understand what are the levers we can pull to actually improve the innovation's success, whether that's through marketing, pricing, packaging, reformulation, and so on, to ensure that our learning agenda for the research remains very actionable. But in this example, we have a couple of different funnel elements. So in the awareness stage, we might want to learn to what extent product or brand awareness is our biggest blocker to success. So is it simply that consumers don't know about this great new product, or which marketing platforms are blanketing the market, or which distribution channels are driving the most physical availability? And how can we better shape conversations with our retail partners? At the interest stage, we might learn what kinds of communications are driving incremental value for consumers, or what kinds of key benefits are driving trial, or which communication channels are more valuable. In the decision stage, we might learn which brands are our key competitors in this space and why are they garnering this kind of value, or what kinds of purchase drivers differentiate our product from competitors, and what are the leading barriers of purchase. In the trial stage, we might discover the key reasons behind purchase, or what expectations about the product they had that actually drove trial. And finally, in our repurchase phase, we might discover, does value rise after trial? And how has the product experience informed these value perceptions, as well as what kinds of trends we can spot over time as we follow the innovation's life cycle. And regardless of the particulars of the innovation, there are three key outputs that we recommend from our innovation tracking that are helpful to understand a more holistic perception of value of our innovations. So the first is analysis of our purchase funnel, something we saw in the previous slide, which allows us to study the size and characteristics of different groups, such as repurchasers, how might they be interacting with the product, lapsed buyers, why they're no longer purchasing, or future trialists, those who haven't heard about our innovation just yet. And we do this in order to understand the value perceptions and opportunities to drive incremental value for our innovation. Second is value development over time. So following that innovation on its journey, and this gives us an opportunity to spot changes in things like target audience composition, reasons to buy, usage occasions, distribution channels and preferences, attributes and associations that inform value perceptions, or perhaps certain geographies where value is rising faster or more slowly than others. And third the drivers and barriers to purchase. So the why behind people's decision-making and why they value products the way that they do. And here we can unpack the true reasons why consumers are interacting with these products. So ultimately, we believe we have got a very strong business case in tracking new innovations, and it seems like most of you agree that innovation tracking does provide a lot of value. But we really think it's important to deeply understand the trends driving purchase and the ways to leverage this. So for more accurate and realistic results, we think it's best to study true consumer behavior rather than claimed purchase intent. And for a more holistic understanding of innovation, we think considering value alongside mental and physical availability is essential. And for more actionable insights, we believe that tracking how value changes over time and through each stage of that purchase funnel is key. So with that, we'd love to take any questions.
Exactly. I think we went through the materials quite rapidly. I hope
Indeed.
It was interesting. Where we'd love to address any questions. So I believe there's a chat function that you can use for this. So I see a question from Martha Rojas. How long after the launch you make tracking and how many times? I think this is a great question. There is not one single truth to this. I think we need to look what works for your category and for your needs. How we are doing this now most commonly with our current clients is that we do either year 1 or year 1 and 2 tracking, where we do a number of dips per year, but with continuous monitoring or continuous data gathering. So we gather data continuously, and then we report on it a number of times a year. And typically we streamline that with the most important campaigns or promotions to really capture back, well, what was the effect of them, and can we learn enough on it? And the sample size we use of this also fluctuates quite a bit, but we do see that we need indeed a sufficient read on, well, all kind of groups. So people that are not aware, people that are aware, ideally trialists or repeat purchasers if we're a little bit further down the funnel. So typically we gather this quite with a healthy sample size, starting at, I would say, 800 to 1,000 per dip. Clark, can you compliment me on this? Is that?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, absolutely. I think having a large enough sample size helps to reveal those kinds of groups we were talking about earlier. So for instance, the lapsed buyers, we might want to really understand in some good detail why they're no longer purchasing, and same for repurchases. So I would say our very broad recommendation would be, as you said, 1,000 participants per dip.
Exactly. Clark, I see also a question from, I hope I say this right, Wissam Tefahi, who asks, can we go back to the funnel metrics and explain it a little bit more? Would you be able to get that?
Sure. So let me go back in time and see if we're able to do this. So essentially, I think, like I said before, just to recap, this is a very kind of generic example of how a purchase funnel might look. And it's obviously going to depend on the kind of product, brand, and category that you're interested in studying. But in this case, we've split up our purchase funnel into 5 different stages. And here we're going to track consumers as they sort of start to enter into those different funnels. So for instance, in the awareness phase, we might want to understand whether consumers are already aware of the product, or if not, the kinds of communication channels they might be most likely to encounter that product in. So really trying to understand how we can close that gap in terms of awareness, and truly understand whether awareness itself is our key blocker. In terms of interest, we're trying to understand the kinds of competitive environment that we're operating in. We might be trying to understand the kind of value that other brands in the space are bringing to consumers, and how we can leverage those kinds of trends. For the decision-making, we might want to understand in some greater detail about the consideration set that consumers are adopting. So we might want to understand in a little bit more detail how our competitors come up against our innovation. And then trial, for the that first sort of purchase, we want to understand among, like we were saying before, that group who's already been exposed to the product, whether it sort of met their expectations, or not. And then also among people who are aware of the product, but have not yet tried out the product, why that is the case. And finally, for repeat, understanding in a little bit more detail, does value rise after trial? Does the product experience deliver on those expectations that consumers had going in? And then is that leading to future purchases? So kind of a bit of a broad or generic purchase funnel, and it really does depend a little bit on the category, as I said, but certainly a lot of actionable insights throughout the purchase funnel that we can leverage.
And I think what is also very true, Clark, is that we can also include custom effects. So if there is a large campaign at hand, we will include some custom questioning if people were exposed to the campaign and what it did for their awareness, but also how that impacted the value that they see in the good or the product.
Absolutely. So we can certainly test out all of our marketing colleagues' ability to influence value with their campaigns and check on whether we are seeing value rising in the right way.
Yeah. See some new questions from Sadaf Sartipi. Are there ways to adapt the methodology or fieldwork to be better able to reach lower or middle income consumers or markets, e.g. web-based questionnaire, but face-to-face format? Essentially, how do we run innovation tracking in markets where consumers have less access to internet or lower literacy rates? Well, this is a great question. And I think the question is what we have built is a platform to track this. And most convenient is if we gather completes online, but it's not always possible, indeed, because sometimes in less developed markets, not everybody has access to internet, or people have access to online payment systems, or indeed literacy rates are a challenge. And there typically we partner up with a local fieldwork provider. So we then do either street intercepts, face-to-face interviews at home, or at the point of sale where we are able to connect with people and capture them that way. And this can be on an entire market, but can even be hyper-local, where we just, if there's a pre-launch in a certain geographical area, one specific city, or a part of a market, we can really zoom into that particular area that we want to get the learnings from. Another question from Dennis Ataman. Thank you for the presentation. My question is about the food and beverage industry. Given current inflation-driven grocery prices, how can CPG brands and retailers use value perception to complement their marketing and sales initiatives? Clark, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think it's another excellent question, although I do sound a bit biased there. I think ultimately the concept of value is such a flexible one, like we were saying. I think pricing has become incredibly important to study in the recent months due to this inflationary context that Dennis mentioned. I think understanding the value that consumers attach to a specific product can help us maximize value for both consumers and brands. And so that can come in a variety of different ways. For instance, raising prices, as we're all kind of accustomed to in this environment, or potentially modifying products, restaging them so that they drive additional value for consumers and consumers can really see the value there. And then I would say on the marketing side as well, trying to understand which are the campaigns, which are the key messages that will drive incremental value. So really testing.
Exactly. And I think one of the core capabilities also that we have with Veylinx is pre-launch, is really understanding the value that people see in your concepts pre-launch. So that is very often a validation that we do before launching the market to ensure that you're selling it at the right price. And we had a previous webinar on this and how to measure pricing in times of high inflation, where this value component, of course, plays a crucial role.
I see we have a question from Anonymous. Can the same approach be used for existing products and brands instead of innovations?
Yes, it can. And that is, I think, also a little bit where we, for instance, had the example where we are auctioning off occasionally a gift card that is used to be spent on a specific brand, a specific store, or only a specific product, where the total value acquires for 100%. And then we see, well, how is the value? How close are people getting to the maximum value of a product over time? So you can include a value component in your overall brand measurement or product tracking capabilities as one of the key performance indicators. Anything to add there, Clark?
No, I think you answered that very adeptly. I would say that the auction-based methodology, or skin in the game, is really our central pillar here at Veylinx. And so I think it can be used in a lot of different applications, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. And then talking further about the KPIs. So are there success criteria? Do we have to define these beforehand, or is there a standard? Clark.
Yeah, so I think we'd love to sit down before we embark on any innovation tracking work to really understand, and I think I mentioned this before, the kinds of levers or the ways we can influence innovation to make sure that all of our research, all of our learning agenda, and all of our reporting is very actionable for the business. So while we do have a standard series of KPIs, and we can thankfully draw on benchmarks as well, we do really want to understand in greater detail what are the kinds of things that we can influence and what is important to be tracked. So I would say we do have a standard suite of KPIs. However, to get something a lot more actionable, we want to understand a little bit more about how we can steer the ship, or use that steering wheel metaphor.
Brilliant. Ooh. Well, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you for all your questions. This has been very interactive, and with that, very fun to present as well. I hope this was insightful. I hope we inspired you a little bit with different ways to look at innovation tracking. If you're interested to learn more, please reach out to Clark or myself, and we will be happy to have a more detailed conversation with you. Our email addresses are here on the slide. So thank you for attending. I believe our team will share with you the recordings afterwards. And yeah, we would love to further connect with you on this topic. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Thank you.